the lowest rung. The smell hit Ryan first. It always did. 3 years working the waste tunnels beneath the dragon hold, and he still hadn't gotten used to it. Chemical runoff, discarded food, and things he preferred not to think about all mixed together in the massive disposal chutes that ran through the station's lower levels. Ryan adjusted his breather mask and continued scrubbing. The work was mindless, repetitive, and exactly what humans were supposed to do in the Draconic Empire. Keep your head down, do your job, and never, ever go anywhere near the dragons. Not that he had a choice about that last part. His family name made sure of it. Miller. His great-great-grandfather had fought in the dragon wars on the losing side. That made Ryan's bloodline tainted in dragon eyes. Some humans got to work in the kitchens, maybe even in maintenance for the middle levels. But a Miller? The lowest jobs only. The ones nobody else wanted. He'd never even seen a real dragon up close. Sure, he'd glimpsed them on screens, watched them fly past the station's viewport windows like shooting stars. But the landing bays, the imperial chambers, the places where dragons actually lived? Those might as well have been on another planet for someone like him. The tunnels were quiet tonight. Most of the other workers had finished their shifts hours ago, but Ryan had volunteered for the late rotation. Extra credits meant maybe, just maybe, he could afford to send something back to his sister on Earth. She was sick, and medicine didn't come cheap for humans anymore. He was halfway through Section 7 when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A wet, rasping breath that echoed off the metal walls. Ryan froze. His hand went to the emergency comm on his belt, but he didn't press it. Not yet. Probably just the filtration system acting up again. Or maybe one of the older workers had fallen asleep in a maintenance alcove. But then he saw the blood. Dark purple streaks running down the wall, still fresh enough to gleam under his work light. Dragon blood. Every instinct screamed at him to run. To hit that emergency button and let someone else deal with whatever this was. Dragons didn't come down here. They couldn't. And if one had, it meant something had gone terribly, impossibly wrong. Ryan crept forward, following the blood trail around a corner. And there it was. The dragon was smaller than he'd imagined they'd be up close, maybe only twice his size. Its silver scales were dull, covered in sweat and grime from crawling through the tunnels. One wing hung at an awkward angle. But it was the eyes that stopped Ryan cold. They were open, aware, and filled with pain so intense it seemed to radiate off the creature in waves. The dragon's chest heaved with labored breaths. Foam flecked its mouth. Ryan had seen enough chemical burns and toxic exposure in his years down here to recognize poisoning when he saw it. He should have run. Should have called for help. Should have done literally anything except what he did next. Ryan stepped closer. The dragon's head turned slightly, tracking his movement. Those ancient eyes locked onto his. Ryan expected fire, expected rage, expected to die right there in that tunnel. Instead, the dragon just looked at him. Waiting. Ryan's hand shook as he reached out. His fingers brushed against the silver scales, and the dragon flinched. But it didn't pull away. Didn't try to hurt him. The moment his palm made full contact with the dragon's neck, something extraordinary happened. He felt it. Not just with his hands, but deeper. Like a frequency he'd never known he could hear suddenly became clear. The dragon's pain flooded through him, sharp and overwhelming, but underneath it was something else. Relief. The creature's agony was easing just from his touch. Ryan didn't understand it. Couldn't explain it. But he didn't need to. He just knew what to do. His years in waste reclamation had taught him about chemicals, about toxins, about how to neutralize dangerous compounds. He pulled out his basic medkit, the cheap one they issued to tunnel workers in case of accidents. Nothing in there was meant for dragons, but the principles were the same. He worked through the night. Cleaning wounds. Administering what little he could. Mostly just staying there, his hands on those silver scales, somehow knowing that his presence alone was making a difference. The dragon they called Ashwing didn't speak. Maybe couldn't. But as the hours passed and dawn approached, those eyes grew clearer. The breathing steadied. The trembling stopped. By the time the morning shift arrived, Ashwing had recovered enough to move. The dragon pulled itself upright, gave Ryan one long, final look, and then crawled back up through the maintenance shafts toward the upper levels. Ryan slumped against the wall, exhausted. His hands were stained purple with dragon blood. His uniform was ruined. But he was alive, and somehow, impossibly, he'd saved a dragon's life. He made it back to his quarters and collapsed onto his bunk. For the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep without the smell of the waste tunnels in his nose. Instead, he dreamed of silver scales and ancient eyes. The alarms woke him 2 hours later. Not the normal shift change alarms. The emergency ones. The ones that meant something catastrophically important was happening. Ryan stumbled into the corridor where other workers were gathering, all looking confused and frightened. The overhead speakers crackled to life. All personnel, this is Imperial Command. The station is now under highest security protocols. The Dragon Emperor has arrived unannounced. By order of Emperor Stormclaw himself, we are to locate and immediately bring forward a human worker. Ryan Miller. If anyone has information on his whereabouts, report immediately. The other workers turned to stare at Ryan. Their faces showed everything he felt. Confusion. Fear. Disbelief. The Dragon Emperor. Stormclaw himself. Asking for him by name. Ryan's hands started shaking again. Whatever he'd started last night in those tunnels, it was far from over. In fact, he had the terrible feeling it was only just beginning. An impossible summons. The guards didn't give Ryan time to process what was happening. Two massive draconian soldiers, their scales gleaming like polished bronze, appeared at his quarters within minutes. They didn't speak. Didn't explain. Just gestured for him to follow, and Ryan knew better than to ask questions. The elevator ride up through the station felt like it lasted forever. Ryan had spent 3 years working in the lower levels, never rising above Section 12. Now the numbers kept climbing. 20. 40. 60. The air itself felt different up here. Cleaner. Lighter. Like even the atmosphere knew this wasn't a place for people like him. Other workers they passed in the corridors stopped and stared. Some looked sympathetic. Most just looked relieved it wasn't them being escorted by Imperial guards. Ryan's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Had he done something wrong by helping Ashwing? Were there laws against humans touching dragons he didn't know about? Was he about to be executed for breaking some ancient protocol? The elevator stopped at level 112. The Imperial Chambers. Ryan had heard stories about this place but never imagined he'd see it. The doors opened onto a massive hall carved from what looked like solid crystal. Light refracted through the walls in rainbow patterns that made his eyes water. And then he saw him. Emperor Stormclaw. The dragon was enormous. Not just big, but impossibly vast, like a mountain that had decided to take a living form. His scales were deep midnight blue, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with their own internal light. Even lying down, clearly weakened, the Emperor dominated the entire space. Just being near him made Ryan's knees want to buckle. Around Stormclaw stood at least 20 other dragons, all smaller but still terrifyingly impressive. These had to be the royal physicians, the Empire's best healers. They were arguing in their own language, a series of clicks and deep rumbles that Ryan's translator earpiece couldn't quite process fast enough. One of them noticed Ryan and hissed. The sound cut through the argument like a knife. All eyes turned to him. Dragon eyes. Dozens of them. Ancient, powerful, and currently filled with something between curiosity and contempt. A voice echoed directly in Ryan's head, making him stumble. It was Stormclaw, speaking through some kind of telepathy. Come here, human. Ryan's feet moved before his brain caught up. He crossed the crystal floor, feeling smaller with each step. The other dragons parted, though several of them rumbled with what was clearly disapproval. Up close, Stormclaw looked worse than Ashwing had. His breathing was labored and uneven. Foam gathered at the corners of his massive jaws. The silver veins in his scales, which should have been pulsing steadily, flickered and dimmed. Ryan had seen enough poisoning cases to recognize the signs. This was bad. Really bad. Ashwing, shared with me what you did. Stormclaw's voice resonated in Ryan's mind. When you touched him, he felt relief for the first time in hours. I suffer from the same poison, only far stronger. These physicians, the finest in the Empire, cannot help me. You will try. It wasn't a request. It was a command. But Ryan heard something else underneath the words. Desperation. The most powerful being in 12 star systems was dying, and he was putting his hope in a waste tunnel worker. One of the physicians, a red-scaled dragon with elaborate golden markings, stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is insanity. Humans cannot heal dragons. They lack the knowledge, the skill, the very capacity to understand our biology. This creature will only hasten your death. Then I will die, Stormclaw replied. But I will have tried everything. Stand aside, Physician Flamecrest. The red dragon looked like he wanted to argue more but retreated with clear reluctance. The others followed, creating a circle around Ryan and the Emperor. Ryan could feel their stares like physical weight on his shoulders. Ryan approached slowly, his hand extended. Just like with Ashwing, he didn't think. Didn't plan. Just moved on instinct. When his palm touched Stormclaw's scales, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The Emperor's entire body shuddered. His eyes, which had been half closed with pain, snapped open fully. The silver veins in his scales brightened noticeably. Around them, several physicians gasped in their own language. And Ryan felt it again. That same impossible connection. Only this time it was 1,000 times stronger. He could sense the poison moving through Stormclaw's body like dark rivers. Could feel where it concentrated, where it caused the most damage. It was like someone had handed him a map he'd never known existed but could read perfectly. His hands moved without conscious thought. He pulled out his basic medkit, feeling ridiculous. What could human medicine do for a dragon? But as he examined the tools, he realized something. The poison itself was designed for dragons, sure. But the principles were universal. Toxins were toxins. Chemical bonds were chemical bonds. I need supplies, Ryan said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Real medical supplies, not just what's in this kit. And I need someone who can get me detailed readings of his blood chemistry. There was a long pause. Then Flamecrest spoke, his tone dripping with sarcasm. The human makes demands now. Remarkable. Get him what he needs, Stormclaw's mental voice cut through. Now. What followed was the most intense 3 days of Ryan's life. He worked without sleep, fueled by stimulants he probably shouldn't have taken and pure adrenaline. The dragon physicians watched his every move, waiting for him to fail. Some even seemed to want him to fail, to prove that humans were as inferior as they'd always claimed. But Ryan didn't fail. He mixed compounds using methods he'd learned dealing with toxic waste. He applied treatments the dragons had never considered because they seemed too primitive, too simple. And most importantly, he just stayed there. His hands on Stormclaw's scales, providing that mysterious comfort that made no scientific sense but clearly worked. On the second day, he discovered something that changed everything. While analyzing the poison structure, he recognized something familiar. A compound signature he'd seen before in the waste systems. Someone had been testing this poison, disposing of failed batches in the lower tunnels. And the disposal records would show who. Ryan showed his findings to Stormclaw during one of the Emperor's more lucid moments. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a conspiracy. House Redthorn, one of the Empire's most powerful families, had been planning this for months. Maybe years. There are more, Ryan said quietly on the third day, as Stormclaw's condition finally began to truly improve. The readings show this poison has a very specific signature. I've been checking the medical reports you gave me access to. 17 other dragons across the Empire are showing similar symptoms. Your commanders. Your governors. Everyone loyal to you. Stormclaw's eyes blazed with anger, but also something else. Respect, maybe. You see what my own physicians missed. They were looking for dragon solutions to dragon problems, Ryan replied. Sometimes you need an outsider's perspective. On the fourth day, Stormclaw opened his eyes fully for the first time since Ryan had arrived. The Emperor sat up, his movements still weak but no longer agonized. The silver veins in his scales pulsed with steady, healthy light. The room full of dragon physicians stood in stunned silence. A human had succeeded where they had failed. The implications were enormous, terrifying, and unavoidable. You have saved my life, Ryan Miller, Stormclaw said aloud, his actual voice like rolling thunder. But now you face a new danger. You are the most dangerous human in this empire. House Redthorn will want you dead. My own council will fear what you represent. And your own people may hate you for helping me. The easy path ended the moment you touched Ashwing in those tunnels. Are you prepared for what comes next? Ryan looked around at the hostile faces of the dragon physicians. Thought about the assassins who would surely come. Considered the life he'd known, simple and safe in its own way, now gone forever. And then he thought about his sister back on Earth, about all the humans living under dragon rule, about what might be possible if someone could bridge the gap between the two species. I'm ready, Ryan said. Ryan's new quarters were about as far from the waste tunnels as you could get while still being on the same station. Crystal walls, automated climate control, and a viewport that looked out over 3 different planets. It should have felt like a dream. Instead, it felt like a very elegant prison. Emperor Stormclaw had named him Imperial Physician, a title that had never existed before because no dragon had ever imagined needing a human doctor. The announcement had sent shockwaves through the entire empire. Within hours, Ryan's face was on every news feed across 12 star systems. Some called him a miracle worker. Others called him a threat to the natural order. Most just couldn't believe what they were seeing. The first assassination attempt came on his second night in the upper levels. Ryan woke to the sound of his door override being hacked. He rolled out of bed just as three figures in black stealth suits burst in. They moved fast, but Ryan had grown up on Earth's rougher districts. He knew how to fight dirty. He grabbed the nearest thing, a decorative crystal sculpture, and threw it at the lead attacker's head. The man went down hard. The other two rushed him, but Imperial guards burst through a hidden panel in the wall. Stormclaw had been watching. Had been waiting for exactly this. The guards subdued the attackers in seconds. When they removed the masks, Ryan recognized the tattoo on their necks. House Redthorn's mark. They'd moved faster than anyone expected. "You will be under constant protection now," Stormclaw informed him the next morning. "But understand, Ryan, there are many ways to kill someone. Not all of them involve blades and poison." The Emperor was right. The Dragon Council called an emergency session to discuss Ryan's position. He watched the proceedings from a secured gallery, listening as some of the Empire's most powerful dragons debated whether his existence undermined their entire civilization. "This human has demonstrated abilities beyond our understanding," argued Councillor Ironwing, a massive grey dragon with scars from 100 battles. "But what does that say about us? For 3 centuries we have ruled based on our superiority. If humans can do what we cannot, what justification do we have for their subjugation?" "Exactly the point," another dragon hissed. "This Miller is dangerous not because of what he can do, but because of what he represents. He must be removed. For the stability of the Empire." Ryan felt his stomach drop. They were going to kill him. Not House Redthorn. Not assassins in the night. The legal government itself would execute him to preserve their social order. But Stormclaw rose to his full, terrifying height. "Ryan Miller is under my personal protection. Any who move against him move against me. Is that clear?" The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to directly challenge the Emperor. But Ryan could see it in their eyes. He'd made enemies of almost every powerful dragon in the Empire just by being good at his job. The human workers weren't much better. When Ryan tried to visit the lower levels to check on his old friends, he found only cold stares and turned backs. A woman he'd worked beside for 2 years spat at his feet. "Collaborator," she muttered. "You heal the dragons while the rest of us still scrub their floors. You think you're better than us now?" "I'm trying to help," Ryan protested. "If I can prove humans have value to the dragons, maybe things can change." "Things won't change," an older man named Jack said bitterly. "They'll just find better ways to use us. You've made it worse, Ryan. Now they know we can be useful. That just means they'll never let us go." Ryan left the lower levels feeling more alone than ever. Hated by dragons for threatening their superiority. Hated by humans for cooperating with their oppressors. Trapped in a gilded cage in the upper levels with nowhere else to go. But the real crisis was just beginning. Stormclaw summoned him urgently on his 5th day as Imperial Physician. When Ryan entered the Emperor's chamber, he found him surrounded by holographic displays showing dragons across the Empire. "You were right," Stormclaw said grimly. 17 dragons poisoned. All of them key military commanders or planetary governors loyal to me. They're all dying, Ryan. And you're the only one who can detect and treat this poison." Ryan studied the displays, his heart sinking. The dragons were spread across 6 different star systems. Some were light years away. Even with the fastest ships, he couldn't possibly reach them all in time. "I'm one person," Ryan said. "I can maybe save 2 or 3 if I leave right now. The others will die before I can reach them." "Unacceptable," Stormclaw growled. "There must be another way." Ryan thought hard, running through possibilities. Then an idea hit him. A crazy, impossible idea that would either save lives or get him killed for suggesting it. "I could teach others," he said slowly. "Other humans. The techniques I use aren't complicated once you understand the principles. And there are humans on most of these worlds already. If I could train them remotely, coordinate treatment plans, we might save them all." The silence that followed was deafening. Stormclaw stared at him with those ancient, unreadable eyes. "You want to create more humans with your abilities," the Emperor said. "You want to spread this knowledge." "It's the only way to save your people," Ryan replied. "Sir." Another long pause. Then Stormclaw did something Ryan never expected. The mighty Emperor laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that shook the crystal walls. "You are either the bravest human I've ever met or the most foolish," Stormclaw said. "Perhaps both." "Very well. Choose your candidates. But choose carefully. Every human you train becomes another threat in the eyes of my council. Another target for House Redthorn. Another soul whose blood will be on your hands if this goes wrong." Ryan spent the next 2 days reviewing files on human workers across the Empire. He needed people who were smart, quick learners, and most importantly, people who wouldn't be missed immediately if they were pulled from their normal duties. He found them in the lowest places. A waste processor named Beth on the mining colony of Centauri 7. A maintenance worker called Tommy who fixed air filtration on the agricultural world of New Terra. A kitchen hand named Lisa who'd been quietly studying chemistry in her spare time on the industrial planet of Forge Prime. The Empire's outcasts. The ignored. The overlooked. Just like Ryan had been. Training them remotely was harder than he'd expected. They had to learn through video feeds and virtual reality simulations, practicing on donated dragon tissue samples. Some of the dragon physicians helped reluctantly, still skeptical but unable to argue with Stormclaw's direct orders. Beth picked it up fastest. She had steady hands and a natural intuition for biochemistry. Tommy struggled with the theory but excelled at the practical application. Lisa asked 1,000 questions but remembered every answer. Within a week, they were ready. Ryan coordinated their efforts from the Dragon Hold while his students traveled to their assigned patients. He watched through live feeds, his heart in his throat, as Beth placed her hands on Commander Steelscale for the first time. As Tommy approached Governor Cloudwing with shaking hands. As Lisa mixed her first treatment compound for Admiral Sunfire. And it worked. One by one, the poisoned dragons began to recover. Ryan's students succeeded where the Empire's finest physicians had failed. The impossible was becoming routine. But with each success, the danger grew. House Redthorn had been counting on those deaths to weaken Stormclaw's support. Now their entire plan was unraveling because of 4 humans with waste tunnel experience and crash course medical training. The news reached Ryan through official channels, but he felt the truth in his gut before anyone said the words. House Redthorn had seized 3 outer star systems in an open coup. They declared Stormclaw unfit to rule, pointing to his reliance on humans as proof of his weakness. Civil war had come to the Dragon Empire. And humans, for the first time in 300 years, stood at the center of it. Ryan looked out his crystal viewport at the stars above. Somewhere out there, dragons were choosing sides. Fleets were mobilizing. Worlds were preparing for battle. And 4 humans who used to scrub floors and clean waste chutes had become the most important pieces on the board. What have I done? Ryan whispered to his reflection. But deep down, he knew. He'd given humanity a chance. Whether that chance led to salvation or destruction remained to be seen. The war came faster than anyone expected. House Redthorn didn't waste time with diplomatic games or political maneuvering. They hit hard and they hit everywhere at once. 3 star systems fell in the first week. 2 more teetered on the edge of switching sides. And everywhere, the message was the same. Stormclaw had grown weak, dependent on inferior humans, unfit to lead the dragon race. Ryan watched the battle reports flood in from his workstation on the Dragon Hold. Each update brought worse news. Redthorn forces were advancing on multiple fronts. Worse, they were targeting the dragons Ryan's team had saved. Commander Steelscale barely escaped an ambush. Governor Cloudwing's palace was bombed. Admiral Sunfire lost an entire wing defending her homeworld. "They're trying to finish what the poison started," Beth said over the video link. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from weeks of non-stop work. "Every dragon we saved is now a primary target." "Then we keep them alive," Ryan replied. "That's all we can do." But it wasn't enough. Ryan's team of 4 had grown to almost 20 human healers spread across the Empire, but they were still vastly outnumbered by the scale of the conflict. And now they faced a new problem. The human populations on contested worlds were fracturing. Tommy called in from New Terra with disturbing news. "Ryan, we've got a situation. The humans here are organizing. Some of them want to use the chaos to rebel. They're saying this is our chance for freedom while the dragons are fighting each other." Ryan felt his stomach drop. He understood the temptation. After 300 years of subjugation, watching your oppressors tear each other apart must feel like divine justice. But he'd seen Redthorn's internal communications, intercepted by Stormclaw's intelligence network. He knew what the rebels didn't. "Tell them the truth," Ryan said. "Redthorn's vision for the Empire doesn't include us. At all. I've seen their plans, Tommy. If they win, the first thing they'll do is sterilize every human world. They literally call us a contamination that must be cleansed. Tommy's face went pale on the screen. You're serious? Completely. Stormclaw may have kept us down, but at least he kept us alive. Red Thorn sees our very existence as an insult to dragon purity. We help the Emperor, or we all die. Those are the only options. The message spread through the human underground networks, but not everyone believed it. Ryan couldn't blame them. Trusting the dragons, even to save their own lives, went against every instinct humans had developed over 3 centuries of oppression. Then came the attack that changed everything. Ryan was working late, reviewing treatment protocols for a newly poisoned dragon, when the alarms blared. Not the station alarms. His personal emergency beacon. Beth was in trouble. He pulled up her location feed. She was on Centauri 7, in the middle of the mining colony where she'd grown up. The video showed chaos. Red Thorn soldiers, both dragon and their own human collaborators, were rounding up people. Beth's voice came through panicked and broken. Ryan, they're taking everyone. Every human who's helped the Emperor. Our families. Our friends. They're saying we're traitors to our own species. They're going to execute us as an example. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything but sit here helplessly while his people died. But before he could respond, Stormclaw's presence filled his mind. I'm sending forces to Centauri 7, the Emperor's mental voice said. But Ryan, you need to understand something. This war won't be won with military might alone. Red Thorn is winning because they're offering dragons a return to the old ways. Purity. Supremacy. No reliance on other species. I need to offer something different. Something better. What are you saying? Ryan asked. I'm saying we need to show them what cooperation looks like. Not humans serving dragons. True partnership. And for that, I need you to do something that will terrify my own advisors. What Stormclaw proposed was insane. Revolutionary. Maybe impossible. But as Ryan listened, he realized it might be the only path forward. The Emperor wanted Ryan to teach dragons how to heal humans. The next day, Ryan stood in a training facility with a dozen dragons, all of them younger officers who'd volunteered for what their peers were calling the human experiment. They looked at Ryan with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disgust. Your Majesty demands we learn this, one of them said, a blue-scaled dragon named Mistral. But I don't understand why. Humans are beneath us. What value is there in learning their medicine? Ryan took a breath. He'd prepared for this resistance, but it still stung. Because Red Thorn just poisoned the water supply on Terra Nova. 3 billion humans. All dying. The toxin is designed to be harmless to dragons but fatal to my species within days. The training room went silent. Even the most hostile dragons looked shocked. That's genocide, Mistral said quietly. Yes, Ryan agreed. And here's the thing. The poison is actually simple to treat if you know how. But there aren't enough human healers to save 3 billion people. However, if dragons could perform the same techniques we use, just in reverse, you could save them. Your strength, your stamina, your speed. You could cover ground we never could. He pulled up holographic displays showing the treatment process. The techniques are similar to what you saw me do with Emperor Stormclaw. Direct contact. Focused intent. Chemical intervention. It works both ways. Dragons can heal humans just as humans can heal dragons. We just never tried before. Another dragon, a younger female named Sky Dancer, stepped forward. And if we refuse? If we let them die? Ryan met her eyes steadily. Then Red Thorn proves their point. That dragons and humans can never coexist. That the Empire must choose between species. And I think we all know how that choice ends for humanity. Sky Dancer was quiet for a moment. Then she moved closer to the medical dummy Ryan had set up, a simulation of a poisoned human. Show me, she said simply. What followed was the strangest week of Ryan's life. Teaching dragons to be gentle, to be patient, to care about creatures they'd been raised to see as inferior. Some of them got it immediately. Others struggled. But slowly, grudgingly, they learned. The breakthrough came when Mistral successfully purged simulated toxins from a test subject. The young dragon stood back, staring at his claws like he'd never seen them before. I felt it, he said in wonder. The humans' pain. Their relief. I actually felt what they were experiencing. That's the bond, Ryan explained. It goes both ways. You can't heal someone without understanding them. Without connecting to them. News of Terra Nova's poisoning had spread across the Empire. Red Thorn broadcast it proudly, calling it a necessary cleansing. They expected Stormclaw to be powerless. Expected the humans to panic and rebel. Expected the Emperor to look weak and indecisive. They didn't expect what happened next. Thousands of dragons descended on Terra Nova. Not to conquer. Not to rule. To heal. Young officers like Mistral and Skydancer led the way, but older dragons followed. Veterans who'd fought in the Dragon Wars. Nobles who'd never touched a human before. They spread across the planet's cities and towns, each one seeking out the dying. Ryan coordinated the effort from orbit, but he also went down to the surface himself. He needed to see it. Needed to witness what was happening. In a medical center in Terra Nova's capital, he watched a massive red dragon named Emberscale cradle a dying human child. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her parents stood nearby, torn between fear of the dragon and hope for their daughter. Emberscale's claws, each one capable of tearing through starship hull, touched the girl with incredible gentleness. The dragon's eyes closed in concentration. And slowly, the purple tinge faded from the child's skin. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes fluttered open. The girl looked up at the dragon and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. Emberscale's eyes opened, and Ryan saw tears there. Actual tears. "You're welcome, little one," the dragon said in a voice thick with emotion. Across the planet, similar scenes played out thousands of times. Dragons experiencing human gratitude, human love, human hope for the first time. And humans seeing dragons not as oppressors or monsters, but as saviors. Ryan found himself standing next to Stormclaw, who'd come down to witness the healing personally. They watched in silence as dragons and humans worked together across the sprawling medical camps. "This changes everything," Stormclaw said quietly. "There's no going back from this. Too many have seen what's possible." "Good," Ryan replied. "Because I'm tired of going back. It's time we moved forward." Within days, Terra Nova was saved. 3 billion lives pulled back from the edge of death. And across the Empire, even dragons who'd supported Redthorn began to question their choice. The sheer horror of what House Redthorn had attempted, combined with the unprecedented cooperation they'd witnessed, shifted public opinion dramatically. But the war wasn't over. Redthorn still held 3 star systems and commanded a formidable fleet. And now they were desperate, backed into a corner by their own atrocity. Ryan knew desperate enemies were the most dangerous kind. The final battle was coming, and it would determine not just who ruled the Empire, but whether humans and dragons had any future together at all. The images from Terra Nova spread across the Empire like wildfire. Dragons cradling human children. Humans guiding dragon healers through treatment procedures. Species that had been enemies for 3 centuries working side by side to save lives. It was the kind of footage that couldn't be ignored or explained away. Within 48 hours, House Redthorn's support began collapsing. 3 of their allied houses switched sides. 2 more declared neutrality. Even among Redthorn's own forces, there were reports of desertion. Soldiers who'd been told they were fighting for dragon purity suddenly questioning whether genocide was really the answer. But Lord Blackscale, the patriarch of House Redthorn, wasn't the type to surrender gracefully. Ryan watched the intercepted communications with growing dread as Blackscale gave his final orders. If he couldn't win the Empire, he'd burn it down. Every human world was now a target. Every colony marked for destruction. He's lost his mind, Beth said over the secure channel. She was still on Centauri 7, coordinating evacuations. Ryan, he's ordering attacks on civilian populations. Not military targets. Schools. Hospitals. Residential districts. Ryan felt sick. This was what desperation looked like. Blackscale knew he'd lost the moral argument the moment Terra Nova was saved, so now he was betting everything on fear and chaos. Stormclaw called an emergency war council, and for the first time, Ryan was invited to attend. Not as a servant or even as imperial physician. As an equal. The other dragons in the room clearly didn't like it, but none of them protested. Not after Terra Nova. Not after the entire Empire had watched dragons and humans save each other. House Redthorn has retreated to their stronghold in the Crimson Nebula, Stormclaw announced, holographic star maps floating above the council table. They are fortified, well supplied, and prepared for a siege. A direct assault would cost thousands of lives on both sides. Then we starve them out, suggested Admiral Sunfire, who'd recovered from her injuries enough to rejoin the fleet. Cut off their supply lines. Wait them out. We don't have time, Ryan interjected. All eyes turned to him. Sir, if I may. Blackscale has already launched strike teams toward at least 6 human worlds. Small, fast ships designed to slip through our defenses. They're not trying to conquer anymore. They're just trying to kill as many people as possible before they're stopped. The room erupted in angry rumbles and growls. Even dragons who'd been skeptical of humans were outraged. There were rules to war, codes of honor, lines you didn't cross. Blackscale had crossed all of them. Then we end this now, Stormclaw declared. We take the fight to Redthorn's stronghold. Admiral Sunfire, prepare the fleet for immediate departure. Your Majesty, Ryan said carefully. I'd like to request permission to join the assault. The room went silent. Several dragons looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Stormclaw's ancient eyes studied him intently. You're not a soldier, Ryan, the Emperor said. No sir, I'm not. But I've been working with Ashwing these past few weeks. Your heir and I, we've developed something. A connection. A bond like our ancestors had before the wars. If we fight together, we might give your forces an edge they wouldn't have otherwise. It was true. Ryan had been spending time with Ashwing, the young dragon he'd first saved in the waste tunnels. What had started as gratitude had evolved into something deeper. They could sense each other's thoughts, coordinate without speaking, move as one unit instead of two separate beings. It was the kind of partnership that legends were made of. Ashwing himself stepped forward from where he'd been standing at the edge of the council chamber. Father, Ryan speaks truth. Together we are stronger than apart. Let us prove what this new empire could become. Stormclaw looked between his youngest heir and the human waste worker who'd somehow become one of the most important people in the empire. Finally, he nodded. Very well. But Ryan, understand this. If you die in battle, it will be seen as proof that humans are too weak for this new world we're building. The weight you carry is more than just your own life. I understand, Your Majesty, Ryan replied. I won't let you down. The fleet departed within hours. Hundreds of dragon warships, their scales gleaming in the light of a dozen suns, all converging on the Crimson Nebula. Ryan stood on Ashwing's back, fitted with special armor that helped him breathe in the void of space and stay connected to his partner. Flying through space on Dragonback was nothing like Ryan had imagined. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Ashwing's thoughts mingled with his own, showing him how dragons perceived the universe. Not just visually, but through electromagnetic fields, gravitational currents, and senses humans didn't even have names for. They approached Redthorn's stronghold together with Stormclaw's personal guard. The fortress was massive, carved into an asteroid and bristling with weapons. Defensive systems opened fire immediately, filling space with energy blasts and missiles. But Ryan and Ashwing moved as one. Where Ryan anticipated danger, Ashwing was already dodging. Where Ashwing saw an opening, Ryan was already directing him through it. They weaved through the defensive fire like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. There, Ryan said, pointing to a section of the fortress that looked slightly different from the rest. That's newer construction. Probably where Blackscale is coordinating from. How can you tell? Ashwing asked through their mental link. The waste disposal vents. They're using an older model in most of the fortress, but that section has the newer type. My old job actually being useful for something. They relayed the information to Stormclaw, who redirected the main assault to that sector. The battle that followed was fierce. Redthorn's defenders fought with the desperation of those who knew they'd already lost but refused to surrender. Space lit up with dragon fire and weapons discharge. Ryan held on tight as Ashwing engaged enemy dragons in combat. It was brutal and beautiful all at once. Dragons were built for war, their movements in battle a deadly kind of grace. But having Ryan there changed things. He could warn Ashwing about attacks the young dragon's instincts might miss. Could suggest tactics that combined human strategic thinking with dragon power. They breached the fortress wall together, Ashwing's claws tearing through reinforced metal while Ryan used shaped charges he'd prepared specifically for this. Inside, they found themselves face to face with Lord Blackscale himself. The Redthorn Patriarch was enormous, even for a dragon. His scales were black as midnight, marked with red streaks like dried blood. When he saw Ryan mounted on Ashwing's back, he laughed. It was a horrible sound, full of contempt and rage. This is what the Empire has become, Blackscale snarled. A noble dragon reduced to a mount for a human pest. Stormclaw has truly lost his way. The Empire has evolved, Ashwing replied calmly. You're just too blind to see it. Blackscale attacked without warning, moving with speed that belied his size. But Ryan and Ashwing were ready. They'd practiced for this, trained for exactly this scenario. Ashwing dodged left while Ryan triggered a flash grenade, temporarily blinding Blackscale. In that split second of confusion, Stormclaw himself entered the chamber, along with a dozen of his elite guards. The fight was over quickly after that. Blackscale was powerful, but he was also alone, abandoned by allies who'd seen the truth of what he'd become. When the Redthorn Patriarch finally fell, wounded but alive, the war effectively ended. Stormclaw stood over his defeated enemy, his expression unreadable. You will stand trial, Blackscale. The Empire will see what you've done, and they will judge you accordingly. The aftermath took weeks to sort through. House Redthorn was dissolved, its assets distributed to the families of those they'd killed. The dragons who'd followed Blackscale faced various punishments depending on their level of involvement. But most importantly, the Empire itself began to change. Stormclaw kept his promise. He established what he called the Dual Covenant, a new system of government where humans and dragons would share power. Not immediately, not completely, but it was a start. Human representatives were appointed to colonial councils. Laws were rewritten to grant humans more rights. The word servant started being replaced by citizen. Ryan was offered the position of Lord Protector, second in command to the Emperor himself. It was more power than any human had held in 3 centuries. But when he stood before the assembled council to give his answer, he surprised everyone. I'm honored, Your Majesty, but I have to decline, Ryan said. There's other work that needs doing. Work that's more important than titles. He returned to the Dragonhold, not to the waste tunnels but to a new facility built specifically for his vision. The Academy of Healing Arts. A place where humans and dragons would learn together, not just medicine but understanding. Breaking down the barriers that had kept the species apart for so long. Beth became the Academy's first administrator, her talent for organization put to better use than processing waste. Tommy led the practical training division, teaching hands-on techniques. Lisa headed research, developing new treatments that combine human and dragon medical knowledge. Students came from across the Empire. Young dragons from noble houses learning alongside human kids from the poorest colonies. At first it was awkward, tense, filled with the weight of 300 years of history. But gradually, friendships formed. Partnerships developed. The future began to take shape. Ryan taught the first class himself, standing in front of a mixed group of humans and dragons. My name is Ryan Miller, he said. 10 years ago, I cleaned waste tunnels. I was nobody. Nothing. The lowest of the low. Then I touched a dying dragon, and everything changed. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each student. You're here because someone believes in a different future. One where humans and dragons don't just coexist, but thrive together. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks. People on both sides will resist. But every great change starts with small steps. With individuals willing to reach across the divide. Years passed. The Academy grew. The Dual Covenant strengthened. Human-dragon bonded pairs became common enough that they stopped being newsworthy. Mixed colonies flourished on new worlds. The Empire transformed into something neither species had imagined possible. On the 10th anniversary of Terra Nova's salvation, Stormclaw visited the Academy. The Emperor had aged well, his scales now shot through with more silver than ever, each vein a mark of wisdom earned. Ryan, now in his mid-30s with his own grey hairs appearing, greeted him warmly. They stood together watching a graduation ceremony. Human and dragon students receiving their certifications side by side, ready to go out into the Empire as healers and bridge builders. You know what the best part is? Ryan said quietly. Half these students don't remember the old Empire. For them, this cooperation is normal. Natural. They can't imagine it any other way. That is the greatest victory, Stormclaw agreed. Not the battles we won, but the future we built. You gave me that, Ryan. When you touched Ashwing in those tunnels, you didn't just save a dragon. You saved us all. Ryan smiled. I had some help along the way, Your Majesty. Above them, the stars shone over an empire reborn. An empire where a human's touch had proven stronger than any weapon. Where compassion had defeated hatred. Where two species had learned that their greatest strength came not from domination, but from partnership. The stable boy who'd been forbidden to approach dragons had changed the course of history. Not through power or violence, but through the simple act of reaching out when everyone else had turned away. And in doing so, he'd proven that sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is care for someone everyone else considers your enemy. The empire of dragons and humans stretched across 12 star systems, united not by conquest but by choice. And it all started with one touch in the darkness of a waste tunnel, when a nobody named Ryan Miller decided to help instead of run.